This has serious implications for the New York Knicks, as the Milwaukee Bucks are now the 6th seed, and the New York Knicks are going to have to face off against the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round of the playoffs. What's up, guys? It's your boy Dariel, and before we move on to today's video, I just want to remind you guys that around 65% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. So whatever you're doing, I want you guys to hit that thumbs up. I want you guys to hit that subscription button in case you guys want to be up to date with the latest news as far as injuries, reports, rumors, post-game videos that Chris and I put out. Hit that thumbs up. This video is going to be more, again, another video of a stream of consciousness. And for most of the season, the Detroit Pistons were the 6th seed. And maybe like a couple of days prior to our game on Friday against the Milwaukee Bucks, where we went into Milwaukee and we smacked them up real quick and left with the W. For the most part, the Detroit Pistons were the 6th seed. And I was already wrapping my mind around the fact that we're gonna have to face the Detroit Pistons in the first round. We're gonna be having to face Cade Cunningham, who is arguably a top 10 player in the league right now. The breakout season that he's having, he was an All-Star this year, and the rest of the cast that the Detroit Pistons have: Jalen Duren, Malik Beasley, who's shooting the lights out, Ron Holland, Tim Hardaway Jr., who's kind of had a resurgence in his career. For the most part, I thought we were going to have to face the Detroit Pistons in the first round, but now it's the Milwaukee Bucks. So I'm kind of trying to gather my thoughts between the Indiana Pacers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Detroit Pistons. If we go back and we look into the standings, so the Indiana Pacers are the 4th seed right now, Detroit is the 5th, and the Milwaukee Bucks is 6th. And if you take a look at the amount of games that they're back from the first spot, Indiana at 4 is 15.5 games back, Detroit Pistons 17, and the Milwaukee Bucks 18.5. So basically, between Indiana, Detroit, and Milwaukee, it's really, really close. But we also got to take into account the news that was reported earlier last week with Damian Lillard being out with blood clot being found in his right calf. For the most part, whenever there's a report about a player dealing with a blood clot, that player is going to be out for an indefinite amount of time. And for Damian Lillard, for it to be like a couple of weeks or maybe even a week until the playoffs, I think it's safe to say that he's not going to come back for the playoffs. That's a really short amount of time. And with the whole blood clot situation, whenever there's a blood clot situation with a player, it's always like an entire year that the player misses. I hate to bring this up. Chris Bosh, he had to actually retire. He had to end his career because of the blood clot situation. Hopefully that doesn't happen with Damian Lillard. But to bring it back around, I was thinking to myself, even without a Damian Lillard, the Milwaukee Bucks, how would we match up against the Milwaukee Bucks? Not even just the Milwaukee Bucks, the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons. Who do we actually want to see in the first round? Because when the Detroit Pistons were in the 6th seed, I'm not going to lie, I was a little nervous. I would rather go up against Milwaukee, but you also got to take into account that Milwaukee has who? Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis is a monster, bro. Giannis is, I don't know how he does it. He does not have a specific skill that you can point to and being and able to say that he's really good at this. He doesn't have a consistent jump shot. You don't look at him and talk about his ball handling. You don't look at him and talk about his footwork. You don't look at him and talk about the amount of moves and the skills that he has down low in the post. What does Giannis have as a specific skill? He doesn't have one. And if you tell me that his skill is putting his head down and just barreling through the defense to get a dunk or a layup, that's not a skill. All he does is use his brute force, and I can't be mad at that. That's how he's made it. That's how he's made his career. That's how he's got his championship. That's how he's a top 75 player of all time. So I'm not mad at that. I'm not knocking that. But if we're talking about the Indiana Pacers, if we're talking about the Milwaukee Bucks, if we're talking about the Detroit Pistons, I think Milwaukee might actually be the number 1 team that I don't want to face in the first round of the playoffs, and we're actually going to have to face in the first round of the playoffs. And when I say that, that's strictly from the perspective of Milwaukee Bucks having Giannis, who 100% would be the best player in the series. First round, Milwaukee Bucks going against the Knicks. As far as the ranking of the best players, I think the general audience, the ranking would be Giannis number 1, Jalen Brunson number 2, and Karl-Anthony Towns number 3. Me personally, I think the best player ranking of that series would be Jalen Brunson number 1, Giannis number 2, and Cat number 3. But if we're going to stick to the general audience with the ranking of Giannis being the best player and then Jalen Brunson or Cat, or you could switch those two. Yeah, Giannis is a monster, bro. Just look. He has a ring. He has that playoff experience. But that's only one man. And now with the news of Damian Lillard being out with that blood clot, let's take a look at the rest of the team. Kyle Kuzma being traded for Chris Middleton. He does have championship experience. People often forget that he was a part of that LA Laker bubble championship back in 2020. Even though it's a bubble championship, that's a conversation for another day. The fact is they won the championship and Kyle Kuzma was on that team, so he knows what you need to sacrifice. He knows what you need to bring to the table as far as getting a championship. And I don't watch the Milwaukee Bucks a lot, but from what I've seen from all the NBA talking head shows, Kyle Kuzma is not playing up to his potential. And with Chris Middleton being traded, with Damian Lillard being out, you can 100% book it that Kyle Kuzma with the Milwaukee Bucks should be the second option. And if Kyle Kuzma is not going to play up to his potential, then the series might be a little bit easier than we expect. But how do we match up against the Milwaukee Bucks? Let's take a look into just the regular season. This past Friday was the last game that we had going up against the Milwaukee Bucks, and we actually swept the regular season 3-0. Going back to the very first game of the season against the Milwaukee Bucks, it was very early on in the season. I think it was our 9th or 10th game of the season. We won by the score of 116-94. Karl-Anthony Towns had a really big game with 32 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 12 of 20 from the floor. The second game against the Milwaukee Bucks, the Knicks won 140-106. And who led us in that game was Jalen Brunson, who had a really monster night of 44 points. He had 5 rebounds, 6 assists with 1 steal, 16 of 26 from the floor, 29 minutes. And then the more recent game, which was this past Friday, we won 116-107. Jalen Brunson did not play because obviously we all know he's dealing with that ankle injury. And OG Anunoby was the one that led us in that game with 31 points. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, 9 of 21 from the floor in 36 minutes. I just think the matchup that we have against the Milwaukee Bucks going into the playoffs, I wouldn't necessarily want to see them because Giannis, like I said in the beginning of this video, Giannis is just a monster. And if I'm looking at it from the perspective of who has the best player in the series, Giannis could go off, but we also got to take into account that Giannis has not been healthy the last 2 playoff series. In the last 2 years, Giannis, he went down with that back injury in the first round against the Miami Heat 2 years ago. Last week, he had a really bad calf strain, literally a week prior to the playoffs. And this year, we're going to see, more than likely, Giannis is going to be able to make it to the playoffs and he's going to be able to play. But maybe the health concern with Giannis, maybe you need to start bringing that question up. If it happens this year, the health concern with Giannis, the questions need to be raised because 3 years in a row, that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. Now, moving on from the Milwaukee Bucks, I do want to talk about the other 2 teams. First and foremost, let's talk about the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons moving up to the 5th slot. How do we look like going up against them? And what did we do going up against them in the regular season? Well, so far in the regular season, we played them 3 games. I'm not sure if we have 1 more game remaining. I don't think so. I think it's a wrap. But we are 1-2. With the first game, we were able to win 128-98. And in that game, Jalen Brunson led us with 36 points, 14 of 22 from the field, 1 rebound, 5 assists, 2 steals in the 31 minutes that he played. The second game, we lost 120-111. And in that game, Jalen Brunson led us again with 31 points, 11 of 21 from the field, 4 rebounds, 10 assists, 1 steal in the 44 minutes that he played. The last game that we had against the Detroit Pistons, we lost 124-119. Our leader was Jalen Brunson offensively, 31 points, 4 rebounds, 11 assists, 1 steal, 12 of 24 from the floor in 39 minutes that he played. All these numbers that I'm giving you, again, it's regular season numbers. The playoffs is different, as we all know. This whole video, I've been saying that Giannis is probably the number 1 player that I don't want to see in the playoffs because you just never know with Giannis, and he could just explode and even though I have my gripes with him as far as skills and what he's able to bring to the table, the consensus is that he is one of the top 3 best players in the world right now. And whenever you're going up against a top 3 player in the world, you just never know what they're capable of, especially in the playoffs where the lights are the brightest. That's where the real players come to play, and they really want to make a name for themselves. They really want to prove that they really are like that. And Giannis could have that attitude. But the Detroit Pistons they're also scary, man. They're also scary. Just a young core. Cade Cunningham, like I said in the beginning of this video, he's arguably a top 10 player for this season. He made an all-star team. He is 100% looking to make a name for himself, and what better way to do it in the playoffs. But besides Cade Cunningham, look at the rest of the roster. You got Jalen Duren, who's an absolute monster. You got Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley, who's had a resurgence in their career with being a rotational player. You have Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew, who is a quality backup to Jalen Duren. Ron Holland is one of the rookies that's been making a name for himself this season. And one thing we got to take into account is how hungry the Detroit Pistons are. They don't have anything to lose. They think that they belong. They're going to want to prove everybody wrong. And whoever they face in the first round, they're going to want to shut them up. Now, if we were going up against the Detroit Pistons in the first round, the one caveat that I would bring up is the inexperience. Mostly of everybody on the Detroit Pistons, they don't have a playoff experience. Besides Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder on that team, they do have that playoff experience. But if you're talking about the main core of the Detroit Pistons, you start off with Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren. And those 2 players, Ron Holland as well, but he's a rookie. Those 3 players, if you want to add Ron Holland, they don't have any playoff experience. And I know I just said that they're young and they're hungry and they don't have anything to lose. But you also got to take into account that if you've been there before, you know what's going to come. You know that the level of intensity, you know that the level of physicality is going to increase. And this is going to be the first time that Cade Cunningham, Ron Holland, and Jalen Duren, they're going to be experiencing that. And it might be a little bit of a learning curve. So that might be something that would be in favor of us if we would have to face the Detroit Pistons in the first round. But as far as right now, it's the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, moving on from the Detroit Pistons, we have the Indiana Pacers. I think the Indiana Pacers, they are the number 1 team in the draft as far as who would I actually want to see, because there's so many things going up that we have going against them. We could definitely get our revenge from last year. Tyrese Halliburton himself looks like to have an up and down season. He has a good stretch of games where he's playing consistently, and then he has a batch of games where it's like, you don't even look like the player that you were. And as far as the regular season, we played them 3 times, and I believe we've played them all the times this regular season. The first game we won 123-98. That was way early in the season. I think that was our second or third game of the season. Jalen Brunson led us in that game with 26 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 10 of 19 from the floor in 30 minutes. The second game against the Indiana Pacers, we lost 132-121. Jalen Brunson led us in that game with 33 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists, 11 of 17 from the floor, 41 minutes. And in the last game so far, 128-115, which the New York Knicks won. And in that game, Karl-Anthony Towns led us with 40 points, 14 of 23 from the floor, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals in the 38 minutes that he played. As far as how we match up against the Indiana Pacers, as much as, not even myself, but as much as the NBA media, I feel like doesn't give the respect that Indiana Pacers deserve, they're a quality team. And Rick Carlisle, he has a championship ring. That solidifies him. Throughout the season, we barely mention him, and the only time that the NBA media actually does mention them is when they're falling off a cliff. But they have a solid team, man. Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Newsmith, Benedict Mathurin, TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell is one of those players that like you hate to go up against, but you love to have him on your team or as your teammate. And let's be honest, we need to get our lick back. And the Indiana Pacers, I 100% believe that if there's any team between Detroit, Milwaukee, and Indiana, they would be the number 1 pick in the draft as far as the team that I would actually want to go up against first. But as far as right now, the Milwaukee Bucks are in the 6th seed, and we took a look at the standings earlier in this video. It's between like 2 and 3 games from the 4th, 5th, and 6th seed. So the Detroit, they just bumped up to number 5. Milwaukee's number 6. But with each team in the NBA having maybe 10 or less than 10 games remaining in the season, that could flip-flop. Detroit could go back down to 6. Milwaukee could go back up to 5. But as far as right now, the Milwaukee Bucks are the number 6 seed. And it was great to get that win on Friday going into Milwaukee. But we got to take it with a little bit of caveat because Damian Lillard is out. They don't have their full team. And it's going to be interesting to see what these playoffs are going to be like. But guys, I'm going to wrap it up right there. I want to say thank you for checking out this video. I know it was a bit lengthy, but I just wanted to get my thoughts out regarding the playoffs and who we would be facing in the first round. Because for the longest, it was the Detroit Pistons, and I was wrapping my mind around going up against them, and now it's the Milwaukee Bucks. And I just kind of wanted to just have this conversation and see how we would match up with each team. Indiana would be #1 pick. After that, it would probably be Detroit, and then Milwaukee would probably be the last pick. But now that we're going up against the Milwaukee Bucks, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And I'm going to leave it at that. So, guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. Leave it in the comments and let me know what you guys think about our matchup in the first round of the playoffs. Would you guys rather see us go against the Milwaukee Bucks, the Detroit Pistons, the Indiana Pacers? Leave it in the comments. Let me know. But until next time, you know the drill. You know the vibes. It's New York or nowhere. Queens get the money. Queens get the money, long time, no cash. And I'll check you guys out in the next video. I'm out. Peace.